This video will examine how religion and monastic rules were fundamental to the nature of Western civilization. How religion is a set of instructions or algorithm that shapes our culture, and that the expected Messiah must be a new set of appropriate instructions built from existing dogma. An algorithm is a process, or set of rules to be followed in calculations or other problem-solving operations, especially by a computer. Civilization also follows an algorithm which many would say was set by God. For example, there is the rule that all people will die, that love or sex causes babies, wealthy men are more attractive, or that food is required for survival. Upon a set of hardwired rules we have added the laws and norms of our society, thus creating differences between peoples of different regions. There are many rules, and the combination of these give us the character of our civilization. Therefore, the most important algorithm we have is the set of rules, or dogma we use to raise the people of our community. In a talk given by an expert in artificial intelligence, who I can't recall, it was noted that the corporation was a basic form of artificial intelligence since it had a charter, an algorithm, or set of rules that governed what the company would do. We could also consider religion as an algorithm, a set of rules that we follow to give form and direction to our culture. Religion is a set of rules that must interact with a set of natural human variables, like sexuality, greed, independence, etc., and will work to modify these variables according to the belief of the religion. The Templars were a military monastic order that, just like a corporation, had a charter, or rule they follow. They had an algorithm built upon the Judeo-Christian algorithm. Therefore, in order to give an account of the Templars we would need to include a history of Christianity, monastic orders, and the beliefs of the Jewish and Christian faith. Around the time of the destruction of the Temple, and the Roman siege of Jerusalem of 70 CE, the New Testament was incorporated into Judaism to formulate Christianity, a new set of rules that would modify the behavior of Jewish and Greek communities now within the Roman Empire. The concepts of Christianity that were added to the Jewish faith were a combination of Greek Gnostic concepts combined with the best aspects of Greek and Roman philosophy, thus making Christianity a very appealing belief to all the people of the empire. In 325 CE, Roman Emperor Constantine I held the First Council of Nicaea, to establish a more well-defined set of rules for the Christian Church, which would come to become the Roman state religion. With the support of Constantinople, Arian Christianity would spread into the Germanic tribes of Europe. Christianity is excellent for attracting and binding a downtrodden slave class. Since the Germanic tribes were seen as barbaric slaves to the Romans, their uprising would come through Christianity, spurred by the invasion of the Huns upon their lands. In 476 CE, Romulus, the last of the Roman emperors in the west, was overthrown by the Germanic Arian Christian Odoacer, who became the first barbarian to rule in Rome. The civilization and order that the Roman Empire had brought to Western Europe for 1,000 years had ended. This would be the beginning of the Western world we know today, and would be based on the Christian Roman Catholic Church. Latin would be the language of this new empire. The rules would be set by the Catholic Church, and enforced by literate Germanic barbarian kings. This would be the start of the Dark Ages. The educated would leave Europe, and ignorance would rule. A few of the remaining non-barbarics would build monasteries for protection, and preserve what knowledge was left. As it has been said, this Holy Roman Catholic Church would be neither Roman nor holy, but it would absolutely be Catholic or universal. Ignorance creates fear, and produces a population particularly prone to superstition, and ripe for the purpose of a religion. Monasteries would prosper, they would become the primary economic engine of the Dark Ages. The first of these monasteries was founded in Europe by Saint Benedict, AD 480–550, in a suburb of Rome. After a rough start, this model would be the standard, and remain an excellent model through today. Later would come the Templars, Hospitallers, Jesuits and Dominicans, and other Catholic monastic orders. These would share aspects of Saint Benedict's rule, in particular the rule's requirement of vows, poverty, chastity, and obedience. These later monastic orders held significant deviation from the original Benedict rule. This was a stress for loyalty, with the blood oath of secrecy. Both Benedict's rule and the charter of a corporation can be seen as an algorithm, in other words a set of rules that will produce an outcome. The vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, these three rules will produce groups of men or women, that will, at least in premise, attempt not to focus on two of the strongest human motivations, sex, and money, and they will do what they are told. If such individuals are involved in the political governance of our society, they will consider actions that are exclusive of these selfish desires, and be more directed to the well-being of their society, at least in theory. In contrast, if secret societies are made of individuals that promote selfish objectives, we would end up with the typical monarchy or tyranny, which is a small group taking advantage of the larger population. Government by individuals who have incentives to enrich themselves, will conceal activities, and if unnoticed will always succeed as rulers. In order to accommodate the optimum characteristics necessary to rule, secret religious orders will form, and will teach the precise catechism needed to rule. The necessary law for rulers is the opposite of that given to servants. Rulers need attributes, such as pride, covetousness, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, and sloth. These very attributes that are considered sinful for the Christian servant class, are considered virtues for a ruling class. The servant-master paradigm will not end, until we have an open participatory method for governance. A significant variable in our history was the growth of Christianity as the state religion after Constantine, and the Council of Nicaea AD 325. Most people who are reasonable, and have studied the subject, will see Christianity as an excellent tool for governance, as it produces non-violent, obedient and neighborly subjects. Nonetheless, Christianity has some particular aspects that began to be enforced in the Middle Ages, which have been the cause of much tragedy, anti-Semitism and homophobia. In the Middle Ages, it was well understood that the outcome of wars was directly proportional to the size of the population. It was important that your subjects make lots of babies. The Old Testament set excellent rules for this outcome. It tells its people to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and then details the battle activities of the family of Abraham. Christianity began to introduce a new sexual code focused on the religious concepts of holiness and purity. Sexual activity would be for the purpose of making children. Even heterosexual acts were considered sinful. Homosexuality became a capital crime. This was different from the previous Roman and Greek view of sexuality. These new aspects were inherited from late antique pagan Germanic ethics. As time went on, punishments for homosexual behavior became harsher. In the 13th century, in areas such as France, homosexual behavior between men resulted in castration on the first offense, dismemberment on the second, and burning on the third. Lesbian behavior was punished with specific dismemberments for the first two offenses and burning on the third as well. By the mid-14th century in many cities of Italy, civil laws against homosexuality were common. If a person was found to have committed sodomy, the city's government was entitled to confiscate the offender's property. You will note that as the penalties for homosexuality became greater, so too did the Church become more powerful. We can see how the changes of the rule set for sexuality would motivate the LGBT community to find ways to safety. The Church has always protected their own, although sometimes to excess. Can you see how this rule change would become a significant recruitment factor for the Church? When a local population condemned gay men and women to a violent death, same-sex monastic orders and the Church are reasonable alternatives. This would also make for a very strongly united Church, which would defend itself, and its priests from the peasants, and their pitchforks. For added security they may even wish to exclude all those that preferred heterosexuality. Not until the First and Second Lateran Councils, in 1123 and 1139, would Catholic priests be explicitly forbidden from marrying. Antisemitism would be the product of the differences between Christian and Jewish algorithms, and will have had tragic effects through history. Although the Christian Church is an offshoot of Judaism, Christianity has a history of antisemitism. The Middle Ages would prohibit Jews from many trades, but would permit Jews to have a monopoly on money lending. This will of course incentivize Jews to become the only bankers of the early European communities. I am speaking of the belief of the Church as an algorithm by which the people of the Middle Ages would behave. A social algorithm has people as its variables, which will react differently depending on the specific rule you impose on the variable people. It is important to know that when a society's religion injures a whole class of people, they will unite and react. They will feel the darkest metaphysical elements, and blame the god of the religion that caused the torment. Is there any wonder why Christian brotherhoods may have spit on the cross, or adopted antinomian, and satanic elements? They would feel little remorse when killing those that had so greatly condemned them. They would feel satisfaction in the spectacle of the sons of monarchs slaughtered in the Crusades, comforted taking the money of royals for indulgences. They would despise society itself. This is how the rules of the Old and New Testament formed Western history. If you combine the effects of antisemitism and homophobia, you might end up with the Templars, a band of money-lending men, who spit on the cross, and practice sodomy. A knight was a mounted warrior in armor and the medieval equivalents of cavalry. They would be granted the honorary title of knighthood by a monarch, or bishop. The first knights of the Middle Ages fought for Charlemagne, the king of the Franks, in the 700s. They later were the tool of the Inquisition against the Cathars, the reconquista of Spain from the Moors, and the conquest of Jerusalem. Templars were a Catholic military order founded in 1119, recognized in 1139 by the papal bull Omne Datum Optimum, and were active until 1312. The Templars were the banking institution of the Middle Ages, sanctioned by the Church, and possibly the world's first multinational corporation. They would supply the knights while on their crusades. After the many holy wars, the monarchs of Europe found themselves heavily indebted to the Templars. The discovery of their antinomian worship became the solution of the debt. On Friday 13 October 1307, King Philip IV of France ordered the arrest of the French Templars. The Templars were accused of idolatry and were suspected of worshipping a figure known as Baphomet. Portuguese King Denis I was the only monarch who refused to pursue and persecute the Templars. The wealth of the Templars was transferred to the Order of Christ. They would later accumulate great wealth and power with commerce through overseas exploration. In 1789, Queen Maria I of Portugal secularized the order. Portuguese town of Tomar. Under Templar administration of the town, Jews had enjoyed a degree of protection. They had even flourished as a community. But in the centuries that followed the crushing of the Templar order, the Jews faced the full horror of the Inquisition. The synagogue was turned into a prison for Tomar's Jewish families. Eventually, a mournful curator told me, they were led into the public square and burned at the stake as heretics. The Templar Knight. Central to the Judeo-Christian faith is that the Jews must return to the Holy Land. Christian theology is written in the Latin Bible, which most crusaders and laity could not read. The Church with the aid of the Templars would see to the quest for the Holy Land, and to the return of the Jews to Palestine. The Templars may have been disbanded from Europe, but their quest would not have reason to end. When under attack, the natural course for secret religious orders is to become more secret, and more dedicated to the cause. The Templars, the largest military order in Europe, would simply go underground, and move operations to lands governed by friendly monarchs, to the Americas as Masons, and the world as Jesuits. There's an old saying that wherever Scots went in numbers, the first thing they did was build a kirk church, then they would build a bank, then they would build a pub. And the fourth thing was always a lodge, said Robert Cooper, curator of the Grand Lodge of Scotland. An important, and controversial aspect of history this essay supports is that the Church was only intended to be Christian in appearance, in practice its intention is political dominion. The New Testament is the direct opposite set of instructions needed to rule a population, and should only serve as instructions for a servant class. In 1263 King James of Aragon ordered the Disputation of Barcelona. Representatives of Christianity and Judaism would debate whether or not Jesus was the Messiah. It is at this pivotal point that Europe gets its most public lesson about Judaism, and their Christian Messiah. The foundation of the Christian faith is the Bible, and the Old Testament is its basis for the messianic prophecy of Christ. The prophecy told in the Bible is telling anyone who reads it that Jesus Christ cannot be the true Messiah. For those educated enough to comprehend the debate, it is clear that Judaism is the true faith. European Christians are the illiterate Germanic tribes that conquered Rome in the 5th century. They are only now getting their education from their incursions against the Moors and Jews of Islamic Spain. They are discovering the Kabbalah, Aristotle, the Mithra mysteries, and Arabic numbers. The Knights will develop a new set of instructions. Nachmanides Moshe ben Nachman, who debated the Jewish cause, was an important Kabbalist and would have introduced these concepts to his European rulers, before he was run out of town. It is the opinion of this essay that the Inquisition in Spain of 1492, was to bring Jews into the Church, and if not, have them leave the country so they could not influence the servant class of Christians. In Scotland, with Portuguese help, a strain of the Templars would one day become the Freemasons. Edinburgh Mary's Chapel, a Masonic lodge, with records dating back to 1599, is the oldest Masonic lodge still in existence anywhere in the world. Menashe ben Yosef ben Yisrael, a Portuguese rabbi and Kabbalist, will write Vindicae Judiorum 1656 in support of the readmission of the Jews to England. Jews had been expelled from England in 1290. In 1492 the Jews are expelled from Spain, in 1497 they are expelled from Portugal, 1543 the Jesuits are founded, in 1536 the Portuguese Inquisition is established, in 1599 the first Masonic lodge in Scotland, in 1649 Oliver Cromwell kills King Charles of England in 1660 the King of the Scots Charles II, the House of Stuart will become the Kings of England, the land is now open to the resettlement of the Jews, and as they say the rest is history. Defoe continues, there was also the claim that the Templar torch was passed to Pierre d'Ormont, who had fled to Scotland, where the exiled Templars established Freemasonry. From Scotland it returned to France and thence on to Germany. In Scandinavian countries, the Masons drew their lineage through the Order of Christ in Portugal, that de Molay's nephew had carried his ashes to Stockholm, buried them there, and later on established the Swedish Templar Order. There was also the claim that the Templars had assisted Robert the Bruce in the Battle of Bannockburn, who later established the Order of Haredim on their behalf as a repayment. Tennessee Lodge of Research. A very important point to consider is the mindset required for conquest is far and away from the Christian message. It is not important if it is Baphomet, Kabbalah or some satanic figure or belief, but a religious ideology is necessary for a religious order, and one appropriate for the task at hand. Religious orders are far better at what they do than monarchs or political entities, and this can be demonstrated by the success of the Templars, as well as the Jesuits that would be established in 1534, which would follow the conquistadors into the New World. The Templars, whose full name was, Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon, were founded in 1119 by knights sworn to protecting Christian pilgrims visiting the Holy Land after the Crusaders captured Jerusalem in 1099. Their initiation ceremony is believed to have included spitting on the cross, but Frail said they justified this as a ritual of obedience in preparation for possible capture by Muslims. They were also said to have practiced sodomy. Simply put, the Pope recognized that they were not heretics but guilty of many other minor crimes, such as abuses, violence and sinful acts within the order, she said. But that is not the same as heresy. Despite his conviction that the Templars were not guilty of heresy, in 1312 Pope Clement ordered the Templars disbanded for what Frail called the good of the Church, following his repeated clashes with the French king. Pope Clement was convinced that while the Templars had committed some grave sins, they were not heretics. Reuters.com. I hope I have described how a secret religious order is the most effective means to an end. Religion is an algorithm that gives form to our history, and if we wish to have a certain form of society we need an appropriate algorithm. It is both true and unfortunate that a satanic algorithm is more appropriate to the particular tasks of war, conquest, or the dominion over a servant class. For over 2,000 years Western society has been driven by a Judeo-Christian algorithm that expects a messianic age, the return of Christ, or Jewish Messiah in order to solve social issues. This is an absurd dogma and fact nonetheless. Absurd as this concept might be, we cannot simply abandon our religion, so I think it is possible to call the Messiah the totality of the Jewish people. Then we create a Christian monastic order, or use the Franciscans to take on the logical task of creating a new logos, instructions for the post-apocalyptic, messianic age. The solution is more simple than we think, a new spiritual age based on truth, and a monastic order charted with the task of improving our society. The majority of people must have a religious belief to make sense of the absurdity of life. There is only one possible solution, and that is to provide and implement the correct algorithm and belief for this messianic age. The Messiah is not a person in Christ, but the Logos revealed is the proper instruction for going forward. This should satisfy both Christian and Jewish expectations, put an end to evil, and give us a more civilized society.